Hey YouTube, Boy here. Oh man, this chapter of One Piece, if you don't yet know, chapter 834 of One Piece dropped, and I gotta resist the urge of just titling this video Hype with a bunch of exclamation points until I run out of characters. But this chapter was really good. I don't think I need to say this, but spoiler alert, let's just jump right into it. So at the very beginning of the chapter, we get a possible hint to the idea that the Straw Hats will actually need to obtain the key for Sanji's handcuffs in order to get Sanji out of his cramped predicament, and Sanji is not going anywhere until his handcuffs are off. The reason I say this is that we have a panel with Reiju where she basically says, isn't it obvious you need the key? So I can look at this as potential foreshadowing for the idea that there's not going to be any hockey involved in this particular situation. They will, in fact, confront Big Mom and receive the key from her somehow in order to unlock Sanji afterwards. Now to one of the hot topics of this chapter, Jinbe. Oh my gosh. So Jinbe apparently is in the news, and that in and of itself is fascinating. The news also reports that Jinbe basically went to Big Mom, basically reported everything that happened, that he planned on leaving Big Mom's crew, but then met with her, and then was informed that there was a price that he had to pay in order to leave, but then said something really interesting, that Jinbe did not want to pay that price, and therefore it was no longer asking to leave the crew. And let me be the first to say that there is absolutely no way that this happened. Jinbe, my man, has more balls than that. There's just no way that happened. We even have emphasis from the citizens of how contradictory this statement really was. They say Knight of the Sea isn't a fitting title at all, and not only is he a betrayer, but he's also a scrub. I'm sorry, this is direct proof here that this is not the case, because Jinbe is, whatever he might be, he's not a scrub, and Knight of the Sea is an appropriate title. There's some misinformation given in the news. But this begs the question, what actually happened to Jinbe with his meeting with Big Mom? The fact that in the news it's reporting that he basically backed out of trying to leave Big Mom's crew suggests to me that Big Mom is playing a hand in the news and is purposely trying to mislead her residents as to what actually happened. So why would Big Mom purposely try to mislead the residents of Whole Cake Island as to what happened with Jinbe, while still giving them specific information about Jinbe's plans to leave? I have some speculations on this topic, but that would require a video of its own in order to properly explain. So I'm just going to move on here, but I definitely think Big Mom is planting this misinformation within the news. So let's jump into another huge topic. We can see that Pedro and Brook have arrived on Whole Cake Island and as of now have remained inconspicuous, which is great. And they happen to eavesdrop on Baron Tamago and Pudding. Keep in mind, Pudding. So Pudding is not in the forest. I speculated that recently because we have the connection between the clocks in Pudding's home and the clocks in the forest, but now we have specific proof here, unless there's multiple Puddings, which seems unlikely because this is actually the Pudding that's getting wed, that Pudding is not in the forest. And we even get an inkling as to why she's not in the forest, which is that she's currently being taken up by her responsibilities. She's going to get married in one day. And we even have this interesting line from her in which she basically says, "Please, I have a prior engagement I must tend to immediately," when she's talking to Baron Tamago. Meanwhile, while she's getting dressed, she has an uncomfortable look on her face, which suggests to me that she actually did want to meet the Straw Hats on the coast, but just couldn't because she was being watched. And then Brook intimated this as well later on in the scene. So it seems as though Pudding is actually a good character, like I thought and like I wanted to think. She did not purposely lead the Straw Hats into danger, it doesn't appear like. Also, we now have further proof that Pudding did in fact meet with Sanji one time. So I know that people are still focused on that one line where she describes Sanji as though he was from the bounty poster, but last chapter we had Reiju and Sanji talking about Pudding as though Sanji had previously met Pudding. Here we have Pudding talking to Baron Tamago with no reason to lie whatsoever, also saying that she had met Sanji in the past, so that seems truthful. This whole Pudding thing seems truthful. I think now we can fully jump onto the bandwagon that Pudding is a good character, and again adds further evidence to the idea that the people around Big Mom are good people. But the huge reveals of these chapters doesn't stop here. Let's get into another one. So we have Baron Tamago talk to some random subordinate, in which they're talking about the fact that they know the Straw Hat Pirates have arrived. This is something that we've already known. This has been foreshadowed countless times, even explicitly stated by Big Mom. And what he says is really interesting. He said, "We've received intel that Sir Peckham's was nowhere to be seen by the time the ship set sail." So what this tells me, and this is fascinating and ties into the second half of this chapter, that the Big Mom Pirates are not responsible for removing Peckham's from the Straw Hat ship. And also what this suggests is that they're not the ones responsible for shooting Peckham's and executing him. I think that this was all completely Capone Bege. Everything involved with Peckham since the time that he left the ship had to do with Capone, and none of this was on the orders of Big Mom, because clearly the Big Mom subordinates seemed surprised that Peckham's disappeared from the time that they arrived to Chocolate Town and the time that the ship set sail to Whole Cake Island. And this ties into another huge reveal. Right before Peckham's was shot, he said to Capone, "Don't underestimate Big Mom," or "You are underestimating Big Mom." And so what this suggests is that Capone has revealed to Peckham some sort of plot that he has against Big Mom, and this ties absolutely so strongly into a theory that I've talked about and I believe in, that Big Mom and the Vinsmokes are planning something against Big Mom. Now, I said this a really long time ago, but there's a theory that came out pretty much as soon as the Vinsmokes got released. I believe it was made originally by Wasabi Fold on Ora Jackson. He also has a YouTube channel, which you guys need to check out. It's in the description. I'm not sure if he talked about this theory in his YouTube channel, but Capone Bege is based on the real life Capone, and the real life Capone betrayed his master, I think it was like Big John, during the St. Valentine's Massacre in order to gain power. And so Capone Bege's master in this case is Big Mom, which could potentially foreshadow the idea that Capone will betray Big Mom. We also have another theory related to the Vinsmokes, in which the Vinsmokes might try and assassinate Big Mom. This is one I've touched on really recently. And then this also ties in with the theory that the last time that we saw Capone, before we saw him as a Big Mom subordinate on a Big Mom pirate ship, that he was sucked up by this sort of floating planet ship thing. And so this was kind of inexplicable, and this doesn't really look like something that is owned by the Big Mom Pirates. So clearly Capone was sucked up. The events after that aren't clearly shown, and then all of a sudden he's with the Big Mom Pirates. And so the best theory on this topic was made by a YouTuber named Rizo the Theorist. He's a great YouTuber and a good friend of mine. You guys definitely need to check out his channel. But basically, he suggests that the Vinsmoke were operating this sort of spaceship, or whatever it was, this floating island ship thing. And that they sucked Capone in, and that is why Capone is now a subordinate of Big Mom, leading to a potential sort of assassination attempt on Big Mom. Also, it's worth noting that Capone mentioned to Peckham's a way out, which, given the context of the situation, sort of implies that Capone asked Peckham's to join in on whatever his plan was, and Peckham's basically said no, and said that he had an inkling as to how Capone Bege was during the incident on Zoe. So again, further emphasizing Capone's up to something, and that Capone told Peckham's what he was up to and tried to get Peckham's to join him in his plot. At the very least, I think it's pretty clear at this point that what we should be thinking is that Capone is planning something on Big Mom. The other elements of this are more speculative than that, but it seems very obvious at this point that Capone is doing something behind Big Mom's back in relation to Peckham's, and Peckham's knows what this plot is. And just so I throw this in there so you don't get led any other direction, Peckham's is not going to die. I'm fairly confident of it. If one shot is not going to do Peckham's in, he fell into a shark-infested waters, but there's a possibility that there will be some fisherman pirates there that will help save the day, potentially the Sun Pirates. But we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out, but I'm positive that Peckham's will survive. Also, I want to mention this as well. We can see from the Big Mom subordinate that he says, we've also confirmed that 4 of the Straw Hats have entered the Seducing Woods. The chances of escape for them is pretty much nil at this point, so capturing them is a foregone conclusion, which sort of suggests that the subordinates of Big Mom believe that the Straw Hats will get captured. That's sort of the objective as they see it, which would be sort of counter to my idea that Big Mom is sort of hoping that they'll get through it. But I think right now what I believe is that Big Mom hasn't told the majority of her subordinates what her plans are. That for the most part, she has alerted them to the presence of the Straw Hat and informed them to capture the Straw Hats. But I still think that her ultimate goal is sort of the hope that Luffy gets past all of this in order to face her. Because again, we can see that with explicit knowledge of the Straw Hats, she specifically allowed the Straw Hats to enter her island. So if the goal all along was to capture them, then she could have done that at any other point in time rather than wait until they were already on her island. And so my attempts to make this video 10 minutes is going to fail because we have another huge topic from this chapter, which is the reveal of the truth behind the relationship between Caesar Clown and Big Mom. And I gotta say, I was so close, guys. I was so close. I probably was the closest to guessing this. There was also the theory out there that there was this plot to basically give giantification candy to all the Yonko, including Big Mom, but I'm pretty sure I was the first one who really tied together specifically Caesar's candy directly to Big Mom and no one else. And that happened to be the case. This was confirmed this chapter, that Caesar's candy was made for Big Mom. That Big Mom had ordered Caesar to make this candy, but this was not for her to specifically eat the candy or in any way given to Big Mom. It doesn't appear though like that. And it was not for some sort of cure for Big Mom's sickness. It was to make her family all the same height so that they could look at each other eye to eye, which is funny. But keep in mind that this is supposed to be her dream. And I want you to pay special mind to the comparison of the dream of Big Mom, while insane, while she's clearly lost it, is not a bad dream. It's not a dream that's going to hurt the world. Whereas the Vinsmoke's dream is to take over the entire North Blue. I am even more certain, I was certain before, but I'm even more certain that the Vinsmokes are the enemies. Big Mom is not an enemy. She is a lunatic, however. And so now Caesar has 2 weeks to make an impossible to make candy, which obviously isn't going to happen. And so that's the timeline that the Straw Hats are looking at if they want to save Caesar Clown from his imminent demise. But jokes aside, guys, there's actually a really interesting bit from this conversation, which is that Caesar Clown specifically throws the Straw Hats and Law under the bus and basically says, I would have had it ready for you, however, these guys totally ruined my plan. And then of course Big Mom's basically like, oh, it's okay, you know, if you need your factory, we already made it for you, which is fantastic. But what I found most interesting about this was that she specifically did not react with any anger to the allegations that her dream was potentially ruined by the Straw Hats, which is a really interesting choice. This would have been a perfect situation to sort of increase the tension between Big Mom and the Straw Hats. However, Oda didn't choose to go that direction, but rather had Big Mom basically play it off like it was no big deal and say, okay, well here, I got a solution for you. If you're really that close, the factory's already here. So what this suggests to me is that, again, Big Mom likes Luffy. She likes the Straw Hats, and even though they did something to potentially stop her from achieving her dream that she'd paid loads of money for, she doesn't really hate them. Also in this chapter, we got to meet the eldest son of Big Mom, and I'm not sure which role he will play. In the initial scans that I read, there was sort of the impression that he had the ability to turn people into candy, like Majin Buu, but upon reading the manga stream translation, it appears as though he just has the lick fruit, or the lick fruit. So he can make his tongue really long and lick things. I don't know, that's a really weird power, but really appropriate for someone on Big Mom's island. Also, keep note at his age. He looks pretty freaking old. Really, again, opening the door further for Bakken to be the eldest daughter of Big Mom. And so we get to the last page of this chapter where we go back to the seducing woods. And so we see no further into the story of Charlotte Brûlé and the rest of the Straw Hats and Carrot. So we don't know exactly what's going on there, but presumably Nami is still in danger. But we really don't know where that's going, but we can see what Luffy has been doing this entire time. And apparently Luffy has been rounding up all sorts of copies that look like his friends and Sanji and Pudding, etc. But what's interesting is in the same page, we see that they're all making noises, like random animal noises, etc., which sort of suggests that this is all a product of Charlotte Brûlé's mirror powers. She can use her powers, as I've speculated in my Charlotte Brûlé's powers, that she can use her mirror powers to transform things around her into the images of people. And so we can see that's probably happening right here, and Luffy's going around in circles trying to capture all of these, which is fantastic. But still nothing on what's actually happening with Charlotte Brûlé and Nami, etc. But Luffy needs to figure out what's going on quickly. They need to move on from the seducing woods. But yeah, guys, this chapter, holy shit, 10 out of 10. So much to talk about from this chapter. I covered a lot of it in this video. But just an amazing chapter, lots and lots of my speculations proving to be coming true, honestly. I'm feeling really good about it right now. This is why I love talking about One Piece, why I love theorizing. The high that I get, even if I'm not right in the end, the journey there is just fantastic. But let me know what you guys think of this chapter. Let me know what you think about what I've said here. Like the video if you liked the video. I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. And as always, dudes, have a wonderful day.